Hi, my name is Whitney Smith. I'm the founder and CEO here at the Smith Investigation Agency, and I'm here to answer some questions that you've sent in. Here we go. How does a PI feel after catching someone cheating? So that's a tough one because at the end of the day, you have a very two-part feeling, right? Because professionally speaking, when you're on surveillance, if your objective is to obtain evidence of a specific behavior that's taking place or a specific thing, right? So if infidelity is the subject of the investigation in terms of you're looking for that and you ultimately see that, then professionally speaking, you're able to provide a client with the results that they need to make an informed decision for legal action, whatever that might look like. So it's definitely going to be that two-part feeling because if you catch it, professionally speaking, you're happy. You can provide that to the client and they're able to, make those informed decisions. But then there's the real and the human side of that where, years ago I did surveillance where I've done many, many cases where I could give a lot of examples, but I'll give one in particular that was like the most gut-wrenching kind of feeling for me. A lady had contacted us. They had multiple young children at home, and she, wanted surveillance done on her significant other, her husband, because she believed that, he was traveling from one side of Canada to another to go to a conference. So at first she thought that was normal, and something just seemed off. Didn't really know what was going on. We ended up having, because we operate nationally across Canada, this became multiple layers of investigators because the individual lived in Western Canada, flew over to the Toronto area. Our team in Toronto caught him. He was acting like he was going to a conference, went and did all this stuff, took pictures at the conference center, doing all this to make it look like he's hanging out there, takes pictures in the hotel room, which we don't, of course, see until later. And then he goes over, back to the airport, catches the flight towards Florida. I happened to be in Florida at the time with my family. And so my investigator calls me and says, what do you want me to do? Do you want me, our investigators are always ready and prepared on surveillance. So he says, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to jump on it? I said, well, first we got to get client approval here because that's not a cheap endeavor, right? To, already have the layers of the investigation we had, but then adding on an additional layer, which is, the travel and accommodations and everything else. So I chat with the client real quick and I said, listen, my investigator's at the airport. He can hypothetically jump on the same plane as the subject. It's a little bit more expensive. I happen to be in Florida. I can also jump on this myself. So client gives the approval and I end up jumping on a flight and get there, conduct surveillance over the course of a weekend. And this guy is just living his best life in Miami, running around with this Cuban girl. And he's just, cuddling up to her and canoodling. And, he just seems like he's so in love, right? Which is obviously that's, again, professionally speaking, when you're obtaining the evidence that your client is potentially looking for or needs to make that informed decision, again, professionally speaking, you're doing your job. So there's that job satisfaction, but then that at some point you have to relay this information to that client. So, at points I'm documenting the subject and he's walking down the road and, he's holding this girl's hand and he's lovey-dovey. Like you can see he's very smitten. Meanwhile, he's texting his wife, hey, you want to go on vacation in 2 weeks? And, so she's sending me screenshots of these, messages. So almost a very bipolar kind of mentality for him. Like you're walking with this woman that you're having an affair with. Meanwhile, you're messaging your wife about taking your family on a vacation. So he seemingly sounds like this great guy and whatever else. So he spends this weekend with this woman and, obviously you can assume all the things that would have taken place. They spent the majority of time in her condo, so they weren't seen as much and obviously were, spending some time together. When they left and they went to the airport, I followed them to the airport. And, I would say this is probably my most memorable moment of working thousands of cases. They got out of the vehicle and he's grabbing his luggage out of the back of the car and he nuzzled his nose like that to her in like it was a very smitten way, something that you would genuinely do when you're in love with somebody. Different than, somebody who's just having sex because they're maybe not, getting the feelings of what they need to be satisfied at home. That's not that that's any different. That's obviously still an affair and it's still bad. But when that there's an emotional connection, it hits a different way. So he's, nuzzled nose to her and gives her a kiss. And I mean, he's just glowing from head to toe. If you didn't know that this was a married man with multiple children at home, you would think that this is a very cute display of a potential husband and a wife or a couple. And so I had that moment where I obtained that video footage and I'm pulling out of the airport and I literally had this feeling where I felt sick to my stomach where I'm like, I now have to call this client and share this with her, right? I now have to share this video footage, which I would be crushed if it was me and that was my husband that did something like that. So it's a very two-part emotional feeling, right? You're going to have that job satisfaction where you know that ultimately a client's going to be able to make decisions that are important for them and how they proceed, whether they stay with the individual or not. So that's great. But then you ultimately have that side where you have to share information that potentially is going to emotionally crush this individual, or at least, put a lot of pressure on them and their marriage and decisions and finances, because there's so many factors that come into play with choosing to end a relationship, especially when you have multiple children, marriage, companies, business, assets. It becomes very challenging. So there you have it, a little bit of an answer on that. And if you're looking to hire a private investigator or looking to gain any more information on investigations in general, you can go through all of the different videos that we have here on our YouTube channel. Like and subscribe. Send us some questions. If you've got a question and you're looking to get a little bit more insight and it's not one we've already answered, we'd be happy to answer that. And if you have any questions, give us a call here at the Smith Investigation Agency.